Anyways, here's what you'll need. Cardboard, hot glue gun, silver spray paint, brown spray paint, white puff paint or black puff paint, masking tape, a PVC pipe or paper towel roll, spray foam or resin, which is optional, a badge reel, a compass or many circular stencils, a craft knife, scissors, ruler, and some templates. Alright, let's get into it. First I'm going to reference Sean's Crafts templates, since I didn't have access to a printer that could print in poster format at the time, so unfortunately I'm making mine from scratch. The first piece I'm making is piece A. It's a part of the base, and here are the measurements. Here's the width of the center rectangle, the height of it, the height of the inside of the extended pieces. Here's the distance between the small slits on the outside. The length of the extended pieces will vary, but they should at least be somewhat proportional. And once that piece was done, I focused on this one, piece B. The width of the rectangle to the extended pieces, which are very short, is small. They're not as wide as the previous piece, which means I had to adjust my previous template by tracing and eyeballing the angle measurements. I took the center of that and made a rectangle piece, which is piece C, and then I transferred all those to cardboard. You're going to want to make some folds, so make sure you use a craft knife. The cardboard I actually initially used was weak and ripped, but I fixed that issue rather swiftly. I did end up taking about half an inch to a full inch off the rectangular pieces because they were too tall. Now I can connect piece A to the C pieces using some masking tape. I temporarily made some adjustments. I continued to tape everything together until it was finally finished. I knew I had to make another piece B because my previous one ripped, so I traced it onto another piece of cardboard that was way stronger and cut it out using my craft knife. I made the same slits with the craft knife as well so the cardboard could fold. After some slight adjustments to the C pieces, I placed piece B on top. I knew I was happy with the shape as the bases weren't too rectangular, and the shape resembled a rectangular prism, so I started to hot glue it. Make sure you get the insides of those tabs, otherwise it won't stay together. Now remember piece A from earlier, and the slits we made? Well, now it's time to cut those out. I originally was going to cut them out very thin, but I soon realized I had made too many mistakes to go back and decided to widen these a lot. Using a paintbrush, my fingers, and my craft knife, I widened the gap. I gave it a unique shape and then made this cardboard piece to go under the gap. I did end up making these octagonal pieces, again, just a preferred aesthetic piece. Here's the handle with the badge rail temporarily taped to it. I cut out a hole for the handle to fit in, which was slightly too large, but that wasn't a problem. I mentioned earlier that this is supposed to resemble a rectangular prism with square bases. Well, now we're going to make those square bases. After some experimenting, I came up with these squares and rectangle pieces. Here are the measurements. The rectangle pieces are going to go around the square like so. Then I transferred those onto cardboard and labeled them for easier distinction. I cut out those with a craft knife and then also with some scissors. And once I had them cut out, I started to tape them to the square. I was only able to do 2 at a time because the pieces were so long that they would actually overlap. In order to fix this, I'd place 2 at a time, and then cut them accordingly. In this example, there's A1 and A2. Cut a little triangle piece off, and once you're finished, your rectangles should not be trapezoids. They should almost be perpendicular to each other. Copy that with the other side, or the B side. This is how it's looking so far. To fill in those empty gaps, you're going to need to do some more trial and error finding the right size triangle piece. And once you have, you can make the hammer look great with this small detail. Grab your triangle and get a smaller but similar triangle. Trace that small triangle onto the larger one and cut the perimeter out of the larger triangle. Rip the top layers of the cardboard off until you're left with just the paper. Trim the smaller triangle to your liking so it fits nicely and glue it inside the larger triangle's empty space. This will give the hammer so much more dimension and it will also give the illusion that there's layers. This small detail totally makes the hammer look so much better once you've got it down. You can glue the rest of them once you're finished. And then once you're finished with everything, it should look something like this. Next up, we have some details to add to our C pieces. In Sean's Crafts video, you can see that he added some grooves to the bottom of his piece. This is not only accurate, but looks really good, and I want to emulate it onto mine. What you're going to have to do is trace your previous C piece onto some paper, then cut that out and make some measurements using some math. You're going to have to find the middle of the piece and then make sure there's equal spacing between the middle and the edges. From there you draw a trapezoid and add 2 thin rectangles at the bottom. Cut it out carefully and it should look like this. Transfer this down to cereal box cardboard, and I picked this specifically because it's thin and doesn't have any corrugation. It also just looks sleeker on the hammer. Be precise with your tracing. Glue it onto the hammer and make sure the spacing looks good before it fully dries. These small details we're adding right now are going to make a big difference. Next, we grab our circular stencil and trace it onto some paper. Cut that circle out and transfer it onto cereal box cardboard again. Using cereal box cardboard for the same reason, of course. Make a slightly smaller circle and trace that out as well. It should look like this. We're going to glue it onto the hammer later. Now onto the handle. The handle is actually too short for the hammer. It doesn't look proportional to the hammer unless it's tall. Therefore, I had to make an extension of the handle. After making some markings on it, I decided I would extend it by a little over 1.25 inches. I got a roll of cardboard and then secured it with a strip of cereal box cardboard, kind of like this. Now it fits great. I did try to see how I could be resourceful and use all the brown items I had, like leather or craft foam, but just save yourself the hassle and go ahead and get some brown spray paint. I found this bottom of an egg carton, which I thought would be perfect, so I took it up and cut it up. It fit perfectly, so I traced it on some cardboard and made any changes that were needed. Then I made these trapezoid-looking pieces that were supposed to fit around the circle, but they were too small originally, so I upscaled them by making them bigger and tracing them out into cardboard. That way I had a bigger version, which looked way better. I then decided now would be a good time for a test, so I removed the temporary tape that was on the handle. Then I decided to glue the two weird looking pieces onto the circle, but I didn't like the empty space between them, so I made these trapezoids to connect. Still, there was these two big gaping holes, and I decided to fill them in with some cereal box cardboard. Just one giant long cereal box rectangle wrapped around the handle. After assessing and making sure everything looked good, I was pretty happy, so I glued everything all together. I did end up sanding down the bottom of the handle so I could smoothly put the piece over it, and then I cut a slit into the egg carton piece so I could put the ring of the badge reel into it. Now, unfortunately, this badge reel actually ended up breaking, as you can see here, only after a few test runs, and ended up jamming. In this close-up shot, you can see the jammed right there, and so at the time I had to work on something else. Luckily though, I did end up finding another badge reel from my key, so I cut that off. I temporarily attached it to the handle, and to my surprise, it worked pretty well. However, I wasn't going to do any more test runs just to prevent another badge reel breaking. It's time to make the ringlets of the handle, which you can see in Sean Craft's video right here. So after finding this cardboard paper roll, I marked it up and cut it up into a few sections. I was going to use these sections to create the ringlets. Since the cardboard was already rolled up, it was going to be pretty easy to wrap around the handle. I designed this ringlet shape as you can see here, and test glued it on. Here's the full shape unraveled for reference. And then I made multiple copies of that, repeating the tracing and cutting process. I also made a small piece to go on top of the handle. Each ringlet had a smaller, about half-size version. That way each ringlet had layers. Finally, it was time to paint, and I used aluminum, metallic, and this Kona paint, which was honestly a little bit too dark. After painting the ringlets, I puff painted the previous piece that would go on the bottom of the handle. I made sure to mark where it would end so I could put the ringlets on accordingly. And then one by one, I glued on the ringlets onto the handle. It was sort of tedious, but it was definitely worth it. Now back to the puff painted piece. It did have a little wear and tear, but I had to do the other side. And now, the other side is done. I took that badge roll from earlier and cut it up. This way I can make a strap for the hammer, which I never actually ended up using. And then I printed out these rune templates to put on the sides of the hammer. I also printed out these triangle pieces, which took me a few iterations until I got the right size, but once I did, I was pretty happy with them. The last templates I printed out were these circle pieces with the runes on them as well. I didn't have any black puff paint at the time, but honestly, I don't think the color matters because you're just going to spray paint them over anyway. When I first started, I took my time, but I honestly got lazy as I went. It was pretty boring. Make sure to puff paint the circle piece too, and then make sure you cut out those triangles as well. Obviously, cut them out of cereal box cardboard. I had to wait about a day for the puff paint to fully dry, but then I was able to paint them silver, and that's when this project really started to come together. After I was done painting everything silver, which the runes came out great by the way, I painted that bottom piece and attached it to the bottom of the handle. I then made a quick bracelet for the badge reel, and I made a mark on my wrist to know where to place the bracelet. After that, I started gluing on all the runes one by one. And soon enough, everything was completed. Alright, some final words about this project. So when you throw it, make sure to jerk your hand back so it actually comes back to you, because obviously this hammer is pretty heavy, and I'll leave some tips and tricks in the description along with credits for the music, references, and anything else. Have a great day, and see you guys next time. MBG out.